Howdy, it's Jim Morado, and this is it's May 20th, 2023. It was a Saturday, first weekend after Mother's Day, I believe, and we are in the Mt Vernon, Kentucky area, and we are driving to the Great Saltpetre Cave. And this is something that just wasn't even on my radar, and somebody sent me a message that these guys were going to have this old cave open for free tours. You know, I love caves in Kentucky, and I go to Mammoth Cave, Carter Cave frequently. You can check out my channel. I've got other tours of various caves on those properties up, and I didn't know about this cave at all. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about it, but it's an old show cave. They halted being a show cave, I think, back in the mid 80s, and now there's a group that just kind of preserves it, and I think they mostly use it just for educational purposes. I believe if you've got a school, a group of school kids that you want to take here, you could probably give them a call. Yeah, you got to drive back a little bit to find this place, by the way. The drive slow. It was a little rough driving there at places. Of course, if you drive slow, you're good. And it was a good ways off the beaten path, just for what that's worth. But it was definitely worth the drive to get here. It was a pleasant drive, and I was glad we did this. And I'm very excited about this cave. Again, it wasn't on my radar at all. It's not in my Gurney Guide. My Gurney Guide, I do have an older copy, but I just had trouble finding much info on this one. I did find an old Kentucky Explorer issue that had some info. But we drove out here, and we did the tour just to give you a rough idea of the parking lot. They were accepting donations, but otherwise this was a free tour. They did have a little concession stand. Local fire department was giving away, I think, bean soup and cornbread for a donation, which was very kind of them. Okay. And I say for a donation, but I think, they were there. I'm sure they would give it to you, and they just had some little donation cans set up. And so that was just generous. And again, the cave tours were free. You do have to walk up some steps to get up to the cave. And this was the most strenuous part of the whole tour, walking up those stairs. Very rainy day. I don't know how it happens, but wherever I go, it's going to be raining. So it was raining hard, and we kind of went up those stairs quick. I think if we would have went at a normal pace, we would have been fine. But we kind of ran up those stairs. You get up to the top, there is a kind of a outdoor restroom area. It was small, but it was there, so that was good. And we're going into the cave. As you can see, I believe there were 46 people on our group, and this was a great tour. The narration was kind of limited, though. Again, ran by volunteers. They kind of answered questions and stuff, but for the most part you were kind of on your own just to run around and enjoy the cave. And since there wasn't a lot of narration, I'll probably try to talk here and there and give you some more info as we go through the cave. But I'll also try to let you hear when they do narrate and give you some of the natural sounds of the cave too. So I'll stop talking for just a moment.
Come on out, guys. Get this group out. Red, just give them a chance to come on out and get started. Okay. Say you found it, right? Squeeze on this tour. Alright. Is it good? Yeah. Is it good? I need you guys to scoot on in the cave. Just let this other group out. We've got 46. 46. All right, go ahead. We're out, man. that from the roadside. But it is on the list of historic places, so it's all protected. 300, the whole 300.
I want to see the land. I can't hold, you can't hold with this hand.
Yeah, and there was a little bit of info for you. It was hard to hear. I promise you, as this goes on, I'm going to try to get closer to him when he's talking. I'm sure he would be an amazing guide, especially if you had a group of 10 or so. This would be a great cave tour with a smaller group. But he does give a lot of good information as we go on. And when he starts talking, I'll shut up. But I'll try to give you some info in between here and there. Sorry about the camera work. The lighting and all that, it does, we do go out of focus a little bit, but bear with me, and I'm not going to edit this. I'm going to try to keep this fairly real time. I'm not going to edit hardly anything out of the video.
There's a couple little places over there. Over there is the pig pen. Pigs have been kept down in there before. I think the farmers used to keep their pigs down in there. We kept a pig down there one year and roasted it. But this is Booger Branch. They call this the Booger Branch. And I don't know, it's not the kind of booger. What do you think a booger is? What do you think a booger is? Not the kind of booger you're thinking of. But back in the 1800s, a booger was a ghost. The boogeyman. And the story goes that one of the men who used to come in this cave, they had slaves, and one of the slaves must have made him mad, so he murdered the slave and buried him in this section right here. And supposedly this slave is supposed to haunt this section of the cave. So this is Booger Branch. So if you see anything, any orbs or anything, let me know. I'd like to see it. And still, moonshine still. I'm sure they had still attracted at one time or another. This still right now is not in operation. This is the crushing stone.
You've always got to have the moonshine going in a cave like this, of course. Great ghost story there, too. I'd love to hear more about the fellow buried in here. They didn't really bring it up, but I picked up a book at their little merchandise tent, and it was $1. And I believe this book, it looks like it was probably put out in the 60s, maybe the 70s, for selling their gift shop. But it's a small book, almost like a pamphlet, but it was $1, and I was more than thrilled to pay $1 for this book. But looks like there's a Civil War, maybe a Civil War soldier burial area. A little bit more information on the cave in this book. In fact, let me just read a tad bit to you before we get to our next stop. The main passage of this unusual cavern runs entirely through a spur of Big Hill Range with an opening on each side of the mountain. Crooked Creek, fed by 9 cave springs as it traverses the 450-acre cave tract, lives up to its name by flowing past both the north and south entrance of the cave. Great Saltpetre Cave in 1804 housed the biggest single industry in eastern Kentucky when more than 70 men were employed here in getting out saltpeter for powder mills in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New Orleans, where it was used in manufacturing gunpowder for the American Armed Forces. And that's pretty neat. Now there's a little more information about that. You can Google some more. We'll see some more coming up. But yeah, and the cave is also forever linked to Renfro Valley, and it looks like they were even doing some shows here at one time. So yeah, so there's graves of 31 guerrillas killed in fight inside the cave for possession of the powder works. They didn't talk about that at all on the tour, but it does mention it very briefly in this little book I got. The book is Great Saltpetre Cave, near world-famous Renfro Valley, Kentucky, one of the nation's most historic caves. And it's about 11 pages. There's no author credited, but it's a cool little book, and I was happy to get it for $1. And yeah, like I said, they had a nice little merch table. They were selling stickers and postcards for 50 cents each. I bought a really cool t-shirt, I think for 25 bucks. So they weren't gouging. But I was thrilled to pick up what I got there. Again, sorry about the focus. It's a dark cave with a few flashlights. And again, I didn't want to cut this. I wanted to keep this fairly complete. I do cut out about a minute. I cut the video off to take some selfies a little bit later as we walk around. And by the way, this group of 46 people are working their way up to the very crammed Russian Dome. We're going up into the Russian Dome area, and this is a very tight squeeze. In fact, you'll see eventually some people start going down as others come up, but we were packed in there. And some of those stairs, some of the woods on the wood plank were a little wobbly, and yeah, you know, I didn't care. But yeah, but be careful if you're walking in this cave. You definitely want to hold on to the rails and all that. But we were thrilled to be in this cave. Again, free tour that they open up. They open this cave up to the public, I believe, once a year for this free event. Usually the first weekend after Mother's Day is what we were told. And again, they don't really advertise it, so I was thrilled to get to do this.
Yeah, it's kind of crowded up here. There's not a lot of room. For this many people. Yeah, this is the Russian Dome. I don't know how it got that name. One of the prettiest formations in this cave. I think they drove that big. I mean, it was supposed to be this kind of similar, but it's like a video. Alright. I don't think anybody else can get up here. It's really sticky.
And just a couple of quick thoughts as we move through this cave. A couple of thoughts I had. This tour reminded me a whole lot of a Mammoth Cave tour. In that Mammoth Cave actually, there's some tours where you're not seeing a whole lot of spectacular formations, but it's still a cool big cave just to walk through, even if you're not looking at the formations. The Russian Dome is, you know, as the guide said, the most spectacular formation in the cave. We're going to be walking through. You're going to see a lot of man-made relics and items that they're going to have on display. A little connection to the local jail also that we'll see a little bit later. But this reminded me in a lot of ways of just one of the basic Mammoth Cave tours. Of course, Kentucky, you've got Mammoth Cave, one of the most famous landmarks in the world. Kind of more towards western Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky has Carter Caves, a state park, and I enjoy going there as much as Mammoth Cave. I love both of those parks. They both have a special place in my heart. Yeah, and then, here's this. And it looks like there's a group that just kind of preserves this again for educational purposes and that kind of thing. It's I believe the Rockcastle Karst Conservancy. And I think you can rent out some of the bigger rooms in the cave for events. There was a movie filmed here back in, I believe, the mid-90s with Steven Seagal, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And I also want to read a little bit from that article in an old Kentucky Explorer magazine. Do miss the Kentucky Explorer. I subscribed for several years, and they even printed one of my letters. Loved that magazine, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
Would you call that for the Russian? What's it called?
What?
The Russian, what did you...
Russian dome.
Russian.
Yeah, this is a dome formation. This
Yeah, that's it when I...
throw a groundwater from the surface, and that makes a formation with a lot of flowstone. With that ground flowstone. And this is actually called a dome. All the formations up there. Bacon.
Does that little go back in the car?
It fits really tight, yeah. I've been back there before. It goes for like so far that you can't really go any further.
Yeah, because it's smaller?
Yeah, it keeps getting smaller. Very, very slick.
Yeah.
That's where you get down and dirty.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of glad to make it out of the Russian room there. It was getting a little tight, but we did. And continuing to walk on. A couple more thoughts as I think about it. You know, as you saw in the beginning and as you'll see more of as we go through the cave, there are a lot of groups that came out. A lot of people came out to take advantage of these free cave tours. And God bless the parents that brought their kids out to this. I know there's a lot of kids running around and you hear some, you know, lots of kids talking. But I was glad that parents were bringing their kids out to enjoy something not on a video screen. You know, it was great that they were getting out and doing something like this, historic and fun. And, you know, I know the first time I went to Mammoth Cave, I didn't give a crap at all about the history. You were just thrilled to be in a cave. So this is a great intro for the kids to something like this. And again, I was glad to see such a great turnout. We're about to go into, we're making our way into their kind of big main stage auditorium, and definitely more on that in a bit. But he'll bring up shortly, our tour guide, that the Steven Seagal movie Fire Down Below was filmed here in the 90s. I'd never watched that movie, but after our cave tour, I went and I bought a copy of the DVD. They're readily available on eBay for well under $10 with shipping. Watched the movie. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I don't know a lot about Steven Seagal. I don't watch a ton of movies, but if I hear about one being filmed in an area that I'm familiar with, I'll go out and hunt down that movie. As I watched it, though, I remembered a guy named Scott Schwartz is in that movie, and we met him years ago at a Star Trek convention. It was back in, I think, around 2004, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He had been on an episode of Enterprise, and I ended up talking to him for quite a while. He'd gotten into professional wrestling, and I do remember him telling me a story about filming a movie in Kentucky with Steven Seagal, and they went to a Denny's, and they, had a nice meal, and they tipped, like $15. They tipped, maybe 50% or something, and they were just talking about how friendly the staff was and how appreciative people in Kentucky were. When they would go somewhere and just be nice and tip, I remember him saying that they were impressed with how sweet the people in Kentucky were. He was a cool actor, big guy. He'd been into professional wrestling, and I just remember talking to him, and I remembered him mentioning Steven Seagal and being in Kentucky for a movie, so I'm sure it was that movie that he was talking about. Fire Down Below also had Kane Hodder in it. Kane Hodder, legendary actor, most famous for being Jason Voorhees in several of the Friday the 13th movies. I've met him several times too, and he is just a kind and generous fella. A lot of horror movie actors are just really super nice, and Kane Hodder is one that I always think of as just being a great person. Again, Fire Down Below, it's an action movie, lots of Steven Seagal just beating people up casually. He's not even sweating. He's cracking jokes as he's punching people in the face, which I guess was very entertaining in the 90s. I guess people liked that. The movie was better than I expected. I enjoyed it. It was a fun movie to watch. If there wasn't a Kentucky connection, I probably would not have watched it. Oh, and Levon Helm, legendary musician in the band, was also in it. I have also met Levon Helm It was Levon Helm and the Barn Burners before he died. He was touring and doing kind of smaller venues. I met him at Fat Fish Blue in Cleveland, Ohio. He came and, man, I bet they played for 3 hours. His daughter sang in the band. She was incredible. And, I think he really wasn't able to sing at that point, but he was giving it all he had on the drums. And they just really jammed out. It was a fun show. And I really enjoyed that. Before the show started, he came in. A few people, myself included, kind of went up to him and just thanked him for all he had done, and he signed a CD for me. So it was cool that I got to meet him before he passed away, and it was good seeing him in this movie. But yeah, so Fire Down Below, I enjoyed it a whole lot more than I expected. And as I think about it, it's kind of cool that I got to meet a few people that were in that movie. And they actually filmed it all over, I believe, kind of central or mostly eastern Kentucky. And you would recognize some references to some of the towns. And, recognize Cumberland Falls in that movie too. So, yeah, it was filmed in this cave. I believe specifically in this little area that we're about to get into here in a moment. Our guide even points out a couple of rocks that are fake, that were props for that movie. So that's kind of neat. By the way, if you're watching this and you were around when that movie was being filmed, or if you had any involvement in it, I'd sure love to hear from you. I'd be curious to hear about the locals used in the movie and that kind of thing. I do like it when they use locals. I like it when they use local actors. I think that's always important. It kind of makes me a little sick to my stomach when I hear an Appalachian telling me that some director came by to record their accents so their British actors or outside actors can study them to make the movie more authentic. Why don't they use actual local actors?
This is the Echo Auditorium. John Lair purchased this property with the cave on it back in the 40s, and he operated it. Tried to make it a commercial cave, but he had loaned it out to people for barn dances, for churches, for weddings. The first broadcast of the Retro Valley Barn Dance was made out of this cave. And so this is pretty much where the Retro Valley Barn Dance started at. John Lair was a big fan of country bluegrass music. I think he used to be a DJ. He lent this cave out for free, to weddings and church meetings and things like that. Anybody wanted to use it, he'd allow it. And it's a natural auditorium.
Who was that? You was talking about?
John Lair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Renfrew Valley guy.
Yeah, father of the Renfrew Valley on stage where the band used to play at.
Yeah, and he gave some great info about the cave's connection to Renfrew Valley. I'll try to stay close to him for the rest of this tour as much as I can, just because he is a wealth of information. And we're going up to the stage. That rock on the left there that kid is standing on, it was used in the movie. I believe there's another rock on the stage, but he'll give a little bit of info about that Fire Down Below movie that I mentioned just a moment ago. He'll talk a little bit about that.
Back in the 80s, it was a movie watching the Fire Down Below with Steven Seagal. Part of that movie was filmed in this cave.
What movie?
Fire Down Below. Okay. Steven Seagal.
It was filmed in the 90s.
In the 90s?
Yeah.
Okay. This is part of the props that was used in this movie.
What's that?
Fake rocks. There's a few of those laying around in here. I think that's one over there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. I enjoyed seeing those fake rocks and him kind of lift one of them up. A little backstage area back there too. As you can tell, they're they're very open with letting people just wander around, which was kind of cool. People got to really explore this cave, and that was a lot of fun. Again, not a lot of light, a few flashlights here and there. They do have lights in this cave, and I know it is darn hard to start up a show cave, and they can be profitable. This one almost seems ready to go. It seems like, man, they could open this right back up and have a little business going. I think they're more concerned with preserving it, though. And again, I can't stress, I found out about this the day before the event. Somebody sent me a message. They were getting the word out, but, if you're not interested in caves, you might not have heard about this. My buddy Trey, who has worked in caves professionally, he didn't hear about this either. And he's pretty tuned into cave events and that kind of thing. But yeah, they do this the first weekend after Mother's Day. Google around, keep your eye out for it, because it's a rare opportunity to see a cave that just doesn't open often. And I thought that was just great. A couple things here in a moment. I'll try to read to you a little bit from a Kentucky Explorer article on the cave. If you're not familiar with the Kentucky Explorer, it was a magazine that ran from, I believe, 1986 to, I think 2017, 2018. The fellow that ran it, almost single-handedly, he did it with his wife, and he ended up shutting down the operation. If you read Kentucky Monthly, they've kind of taken it over. They print like a smaller version of the Kentucky Explorer in the back of their magazine. I subscribe to that one too. It's a good magazine, but the Kentucky Explorer was very much, people submitted articles, people wrote in. It was a very DIY magazine. It was on newsprint, and it just had a ton of heart, a ton of articles. Kentucky Monthly is a very nice magazine, but it's got glossy photos, very slick. And Kentucky Explorer to me was very much what Kentucky is. And it's sad that magazine is no longer with us, as its own publication. They do sell, it's $100, but they sell a flash drive that has every issue of the Kentucky Explorer on it. They've got a couple of indexes. It's a very user-friendly thing. I have purchased one, and it is well worth $100. If Google around, if you have trouble finding where to buy that, let me know. I'll point you in the right direction. But I'm glad that is available.
Yeah, this is the plumbing system that they used to use for the saltpetre mining. This was in the ground. It's right where what's left at, so we preserved that. Of course, it was hollowed logs like that up there. Those logs that put together. That's how they made the plumbing system. They cut a tree down and bore out bore out the center of it, make a big hole all the way through the log and put the logs together, and that's how they pipe their water in here from the creek. So that's like 200 years old.
Yeah, and by the way, keep your eyes peeled. There is a fake skeleton in the cave that I think we see him a couple of times, but be on the lookout for him. And just while I'm thinking about it, let me give you a little info from a Kentucky Explorer. I believe this is the July-August issue of 2003. And there's an article as told by Sherry Hilton and Lou Simpson, June 24th, 1990. Editor's note: one of the best-known caves of southeast Kentucky is Great Saltpetre Cave in Rockcastle County. It was one of the chief sources of saltpeter for making gunpowder in the early 19th century. The cave is privately owned. In the following article, Richard Mullins gives us a history of the cave, where he was caretaker and manager during his last 16 years of its public operation. And this is a great article. Do yourself a favor, go buy that whole collection of magazines. If not, hunt down this particular issue. But if you love Kentucky, splurge. I'll paraphrase a little bit. There's some history about the cave being bought and sold. Biggie sold the cave to John Layer, the father of country music in Renfro Valley, who arranged for some of his famous barn dance talents to perform in the cave. John Layer was a World War I veteran who had been a disc jockey on a radio station in Chicago before coming to the Renfro Valley area. Layer was well liked, and it was during this time that Richard managed the cave and campground, while his wife sold tickets, soft drinks, and souvenirs in the shop close to the main entrance. Many gray-haired women who took the tour of the cave said that they remembered square dances and even church services that had been held in the cave when they were young girls. They really enjoyed seeing the cave again because it reminded them of how much fun they'd had there. Richard says that the admission for a guided tour was $2 for adults, $1 for children, and the little ones, 8 years of age, were admitted free. And the article goes on a bit. The cave was open to the public from April 1st to November 1st each year, and closed about 5 years ago, 1985, when John Layer died. The new owner, Steiner Rain, just didn't want to fool around with the public enterprise aspect of cave ownership, so Richard moved back to his original homestead a half-mile away. Richard was not sure about exact dates, but knew that the cave had been mined for saltpeter to make gunpowder during the Civil War, when it was inhabited by Union soldiers during the early years as well. He also thinks that Dr. Sam Brown from Lexington held an interest in the cave at one time, as well as John Baker from Tennessee. And a few other things of note from the article. The great iron gates to the cave are remnants of the old Mt Vernon jail. We'll learn about those here in a moment. Bill Bostick, a stonemason who built the gift shop, installed the gates. Before the electric lights were installed, about 20 years ago, at the time of the article, 15 kerosene lanterns, which hung on posts, provided light for the cave. Even after the electric lights, the guides carried at least 2 lanterns in case of a power failure. John Layer encouraged the local churches to hold as many services in the cave as they wanted, free of charge. And the article gives a little bit about Daniel Boone. Of course, there's Squire Boone Caverns in southern Indiana, just to note. Most Kentuckians agree that Boone helped make America the great country it is today. His name is written in Saltpetre Cave, Richard said. Richard's family owned the land around the cave for 150 years. I can show you right where to find it, near Fat Man's Misery. Of course, the lettering is getting faded and dim, but you can still see D. Boone. He doesn't speculate about what might have happened to the E on the end of Boone, but it's well known that the legendary Boone knew more about wilderness survival skills and Indians than he did writing and arithmetic. And he goes on to say that local folklore ties Daniel Boone directly to the cave. So again, some great information from a great magazine. Again, the Kentucky Explorer. I wish it was still around the way it used to be. It was a great magazine. And I think it was $2.50 an issue. Even towards the end, they kept the price. It was under $3. It was ridiculous how cheap they kept it. Obviously a labor of love. Hey, by the way, you're about to see those jail doors that I was talking about earlier. Look straight ahead, and our guide's about to tell us a little bit about those doors.
Oh, this thing's are in.
all these gates right here, on this entrance and the one we came through before, there's what's left of the Mt Vernon jailhouse. They was donated after they tore down the jailhouse in Mt Vernon. They put these gates up in here. So, are they familiar to anybody? Looking at them, anybody look familiar to anybody? These jailhouse gates? But this is the north entrance. It's not owned by the preserve. This back here is unstable, so try to avoid this part right here.
And I know I briefly mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to just make a note in here. Squire Boone Caverns. I think it goes by Squire Boone Caverns. It's in southern Indiana, and it's a great cave. There are I believe there used to be 4 show caves in southern Indiana, and if you did all 4 of them, they had a little passport book and you got a free shirt. I did all 4 of them. They're great. I love all the Kentucky caves, but there are some wonderful caves. Tennessee and Ohio in particular both have great show caves, and at Squire Boone Caverns they have his remains are actually in the cave, and there's a little coffin at the end of the tour. You actually see where he is not buried, but he's just there in a coffin, which is interesting. I know Mammoth Cave, there's the whole Floyd Collins thing. His remains were still on display in a cave up until the 80s. Something to think about. Of course, you don't actually see his remains, but you see where they're at. He was buried on the property, and I think they sort of dug him up and put him inside the cave to keep people from trying to get bits and pieces of him as souvenirs. But I think they weren't totally successful for what that's worth. But yeah, Squire Boone, Daniel Boone's brother, has a significant cave link in southern Indiana, and I just thought I'd mention that. Any recent crimes or anything happened here? Have you had any weird stories in the last 20 or 30 years?
Weird stories?
Other than Steven Seagal?
Past 20 or 30 years, it's pretty well regulated, at that time. I got some stories from way back about the discovery of this cave. The first time it was actually found by John Baker.
Yeah.
He had come across, this was in 1798, I believe. 1798. He found this cave while he was out hunting. And this cabin was like 3 or 4 miles down the road. Or through the forest or Winnie Road. But he came in, found it, and went back to get torches and brought his wife and his kids with him the next day. And so they came back with a torch, and they took his wife and kids in the cave, and the torch went out. They got so far back, the torch went out, and they was trapped in the cave for 3 days.
Oh.
They said the only way they found his way out, his wife was sitting on a rock. I guess but they was waiting to, I don't know if anybody was going to come rescue her or what. They just said she was sitting on a rock and felt it was wet. It was a wet rock. So John says, maybe the water's been coming in through over that rock, so maybe that's the way out. And they went up, climbed up over top of that rock and seen the entrance.
Oh.
It wasn't as big as it is now. It was a smaller entrance.
They were right there.
So they was in there for 3 days. And so after that, he went back and told about this cave, this big cave, and that's when it was pretty much first
popularized.
Discovery.
Yeah.
No matter what that was back. And these are the old boxcar tracks.
Oh, wow.
We're going the way out.
So don't walk on this side. Stay on this side over here. We try to protect what's left of the boxcar tracks. Everybody to the right. To the right.
And we're about to do some backtracking. What a good story, and you can tell our guide is a great storyteller. And again, I would love to come here on another day and do maybe a smaller tour with him. And you know, I looked at a map. They actually would give you a map at their little merchandise booth, and I think we covered a whole lot of the known area of the cave. But there's still a little bit more we really didn't get to see. But we covered a lot of it. And again, more people coming. Just groups going through here. Obviously, it was a busy day for them. I was surprised. It was such a rainy day. I was surprised they had such a good crowd. But I think, you know, people were excited about this. And again, a very cool community thing. It was free. I think we put $10 in their little donation jar, and they made some money from me at their little merch booth. But they didn't make a lot. They were selling postcards for 50 cents. Stickers, I think, were 50 cents. They were being generous. This whole thing was just such a great event, and I can imagine too, if you had a big family, this would be a great way to do something nice for not a whole lot of money. Very classy of them to open this up and to do these free tours. I did want to mention that on the day we came down here, I had heard about a new coffee shop down in Renfro Valley, Twisted Stash Coffee and Creamery. I wanted to give them a quick plug because, man, were they great. We stopped by, and I'm sure if you look elsewhere on this YouTube channel, I'll put a video up about them and about our experience there. Super cute little coffee shop, great product, great people running the place. Locals, you know, thank goodness it's not a chain coffee place. It's ran by locals who care about the community and obviously have a big heart and a sense of style in a coffee shop, and I love that. We stopped by, we had some drinks. The fella making our drinks, I believe he was the co-owner. Man, he was a pro. He was asking me how sweet I liked my drink, what kind of flavors I liked. Just solid. We had pastries, drinks, everything was great, and they were super friendly. Looks like the community's given them a lot of support. But yes, Twisted Stash Coffee and Creamery, it was just really, really cool, and kind of decorating the place with a steampunk theme. Not going overboard with it, but it was just a cool place to sit and relax. It's right there by Renfro Valley. There were a couple that were camping there that came in, and I ended up talking to them for a while. Always fun talking to fellow road trippers. And the place just has that kind of vibe. We sat there and read for a while, but it was nice talking to the people running the place. It was nice talking to people that just kind of came through. Just a solid place there in Renfro Valley. So yeah, if you're coming from Lexington, this cave, Renfro Valley, that whole area, about an hour, a little over an hour south of Lexington. And of course you get to pass through one of my favorite towns on the way down, Berea, and you've got Richmond there too. So this is just a nice little road trip. You know, it'd be nice if this cave was open more often, but I like what they're doing. I like the spirit of what they're doing, and I appreciate their sense of preservation. We wouldn't see any bats on this tour. Keep watching towards the end. You'll see a little, I believe, a cave cricket looking thing, and that's pretty cool. So we did get to see a little bit of wildlife. Here in a moment, we're going to see some more. Actually, we're coming up on it here fairly quickly. Going to see some more items relating to the whole saltpeter mining. Of course, if you go to Mammoth Cave, there's that's a big part of what was going on in Mammoth Cave too. Looks like these guys were doing more of it though, I'm thinking. So that's kind of neat. They got a little display case of some old tools, and we're gonna see some cave graffiti on the way out. They have their version of Fat Man's Misery, and it was worse than Mammoth Cave's. It was very claustrophobic, and you'll see here shortly. You'll see how tight of a squeeze that is. There's an alternate route if you do feel like you might get stuck, or if you are very claustrophobic. but it's something to see. So we'll check that out here in a few minutes.
All these chairs back in the 50s or 60s, they're not that old. They were used in some of the barn dances and things, the weddings or the gatherings they used to have in the church services or whatever. This is left back here from that. That was probably back in the 50s and 60s. But these vats are really old. That's probably used in a mining operation. There's one of the fake rocks.
Oh.
These V-vats is what they use for the mining of the calcium nitrate, the saltpeter.
And what years did they do that? What years did they do that?
Early 1800s. Yeah, like 1802 is when they started mining the saltpeter out of this cave, and they used it big time. It was the biggest producer of gunpowder, saltpeter for gunpowder for the War of 1812. It even outproduced Mammoth Cave.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it did.
Wow.
And there was like 6 caves in this area that they mined saltpeter out of. This was the biggest one.
Any Civil War stuff go on here? Any?
I've heard different stories on that, but supposedly during the Mexican-American War in the 1840s and partially in the Civil War, there was I've heard that it was mining.
Still mining?
Yeah. Still a small mining operation, not as big as the War of 1812. We couldn't, back in the War of 1812, we used to get gunpowder from the British, but when we started shooting at them, they quit selling us the
They
gunpowder.
stopped it, yes.
Yeah, so we had to make our own.
Go figure.
But it's a big operation back in 1812. And it kind of dwindled after that, after the war kind of dwindled, and the mining operation did. And they'd take all the small operations, but at one time they had 70 miners back here.
Oh wow!
At one time, and they worked 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Rotate them out. Yeah.
But 70 at one time. This is one of the V-vats. They used to leach the niter out. They fill it up with the dirt, the sediments, the organic materials, the back guano, and we pour water on it, and we leach out the niter into these troughs right here. And they'd ship it out to Lexington where they finish the final product of the gunpowder.
What is that?
That's a V-vat. That's for the mining operation. These are all relics that have been found in the cave. That's shovels and stirrers. That's probably how they stirred when they poured the dirt in here in the water. They stir it with these spatula things here and mix it up. Those are all tools. 200 years old.
I have a light again, sir. Sir, can you shine the light one more time, please?
And again, I think it's great that there were so many people here with their kids. I do think some of the kids were getting a little restless, and if you watch closely, you'll notice there are some people that just sort of wander off. Lots of crisscrossing among the groups, and I am certain that many people just transitioned from one group to the other, maybe not even knowing what they were doing. But yeah, you will notice a few people wander off, and especially when we come up to that kind of Fat Man's Misery section. I think they had a different name for it, but definitely some people, I think, took the shortcut and got out of there a different way, which was okay. I totally understand. But this was quite a hike. I mean, we got a nice little workout, and there was a good pace. So it was just a lot of fun. There's Pincham Tight Alley. That's what they call their version of Fat Man's Misery. It's Pincham Tight Alley, and again, it was very tight, and I can understand people freaking out a little bit. It was the stuff nightmares are made out of. And I love caves, but I do have, like, that's a reoccurring nightmare I've had, is the I'm in a tight squeeze getting chased by something. If you saw the third Blair Witch movie, there's the witch is chasing a girl through a tunnel that just keeps getting tighter and tighter, and that's just something scary. I'm surprised there's not more caves used in horror movies, because they can be frightening. And by the way, check out the shadows on the wall here. Just kind of cool. I noticed the kids were enjoying watching their own shadows in the cave.
This is Richard's Run. A lot of the mining operations was in here. The floor in this place didn't used to be so smooth, and it just wasn't this low. The floor was probably up there somewhere. The floor of this cave, before they dug it all down and dug all the saltpeter, before the saltpeter mining, the floor was probably up there somewhere. And this goes back, I don't know. It finally dead ends down there, but it don't go back too awful far. But there's no lights back there, so they don't take people back there. Are they in our group?
I'm not for sure.
I'm not sure. Okay. Down here is a really interesting thing that I have my own ideas what it is, but
it's the exit.
well, yes, the exit. It's tight, pitch and tight.
Was there a rotting?
No.
1779.
Yeah.
1779.
Say, Daniel Boone supposedly was in this cave and spent a winter in this cave. This was in the 1700s, or before it was discovered by John Baker in 1798. Daniel Boone was supposedly in this cave. And according to Richard Mullins, which was the caretaker of this cave for 20 years, and this was back in the 80s and the 90s and 70s, I think he started in the 70s, and he ended up leaving in the 90s. But he said Daniel Boone's signature is in this cave. He said D. Boone, B-O-O-N. And he said it was fading. This is just what, by his story, he said that his signature was fading. It was really hard to see, but that's the date that I've seen, and I haven't seen a D. Boone up there, but 1779, 1777, that's what it looks like to me. But that's the oldest date that I can find in this cave. A lot of people won't know it's up there, but it's kind of hard to see. But the one time before it was up there, so I can believe it. When Daniel Boone back in 1700, before the mining operation, the floor was up there somewhere. Quite possible that, it might have been. Just the D. Boone is faded. But
Right there where his first thing is, you see those dates that settle in that number. Where they dated it.
and Daniel Boone was in this area from 1769 until until 1800s. He was in this area, and we're only like a mile away from the wilderness trail. So he was I'm sure he couldn't possibly, big chance that he didn't spend the winter in this cave.
There's some writing up here, like 14 or 51.
If we're getting ready to go through the pinch 'em tight, and it's kind of tight through there, but there's a lot of signatures in the wall. Don't touch the signatures. Just leave them as they are. There's some pretty old ones back there from the 1800s.
I absolutely loved seeing where the cave where he was pointing out how deep the cave used to be. That was great. Of course, the D. Boone signature there is pretty cool too. If it's real or if it's not, he's going to point out some other cool signatures. The audio is crap through here though, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit. Wanted to mention too. I mentioned those southern Indiana caves. A fella named Gary Roberson, about a decade ago, not quite a decade ago, he wrote a book, The Indiana Caverns Development Story, The Longest Year. Look that book up when you have a moment. It's a very nice book, and it's his story about how he almost, not single-handedly, but he was definitely the backbone of the operation. He developed a new show cave, which is a very, very rare feat. I love show caves. I love when I'm traveling, if I see a sign that there's a show cave. If I can talk my wife into it, I always stop. I enjoy them. And it's great when one is available to take a tour through it. Again, check out those caves in southern Indiana I mentioned. And of course, if you're in the Mammoth Cave area, I always encourage people to make sure they tour Mammoth Cave. But there are 6 or 7 other caves independent of Mammoth Cave. And of course, Mammoth Cave owns a couple of other caves on the national park property that currently are not linked to Mammoth Cave. So there's a lot of ways to explore caves there in western Kentucky near Mammoth Cave that are not Mammoth Cave. And I think it's exciting seeing some of those smaller side caves. It's also exciting to see them because you don't know when they may close. In fact, several years ago, it's been a while now, Cub Run Cave reopened after being closed for some time. A fella reopened it, and I think it was open, for months. And then it closed again, and I think there's a whole story behind that. But I did not make it down to experience that while it was open, and I really regret that. So I always think, when you have a chance to see a cave, take advantage of that. It could be a very rare opportunity. And of course, with everything going on with bats right now, you never know when a cave just needs to rest and not have people in it. So make sure you check out caves when you can. They're always cool.
How many names are in this cave?
Oh, I have no idea. A whole bunch. Like I said, when it was commercialized, a lot of people just came through here, writing on the walls, and nobody stopped them. But now it's history, or this is history, but if you write on the walls now, it's vandalism.
What did they rock with?
A lot of times when the real old signatures are made with smoke. A lot of smoke. And,
Yeah, like the cigar smoke.
well, like a candle with all the smoke. And they just take and put the, burn stick, they use a burn stick and they grind with a burn stick. And more carbide lamp, they had carbides back in the early 1900s, and we right with the carbide lamp. or a rock, they'd scratch it with like that looks like a rock, or a knife.
What is this song?
I can't think of the name of it right now, but I know when you go to Mammoth Cave, there is I believe an entire tour, just almost an entire tour based on some of the writing inside of part of Mammoth Cave, and that is always a lot of fun. And it's neat because especially in Mammoth Cave, they do have some famous signatures there. Floyd Collins, and then some of those early slave cave guides signed the caves, and it's just always fun seeing that stuff. Even though, as the guide points out, now it's a pretty big crime to write in a cave, but if you did it before 1950, well, then it's history. And we'll see too, as we leave the cave, there's a little display of garbage they found in the cave. So I think that's interesting. There's a young lady up front following the guide. I love her. She is great. You can tell she's curious about everything, and she's telling him stories, and she's hanging on every word. Great to see enthusiastic kids in the cave. I was just glad to see that.
1892. Right there. Looks like 1892.
Oh, that was the army. That's the army.
Only 18 minutes. Looks like 1900. Oh, that's 1898. And that's a Mullins, so that's the family. The family used to live here, so I believe that signature right there, 1898. 1892. See one up there?
Yeah, it's 1802. They kind of messed up, but it's 1802. Because you can see it's 182. Well, I was just sitting down on it.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that was like...
I do know there's a great story about Mark Twain Cave in Missouri. There was always a legend that his signature was somewhere in the cave, but nobody found it. And not too long ago, they found it. And that, I think that's kind of neat. Always love a good Samuel Clemens story. And of course, he's always linked to caves. And maybe one of the more famous people linked to caves. And yeah, some kind of tight stairs going through here. Definitely had to watch our step. Very rainy day, like I mentioned, so there was, it was a good wet cave day for sure. And some of those rocks that you're on, they're a little slick, so you have to be careful. And as you'll see momentarily as we go through that tight squeeze coming up, I was thinking, again, if you're claustrophobic, if somebody got stuck in there, or if somebody freaked out and wouldn't go any further, and you've got 40 plus people following you, I can't imagine being the guide and starting to have to relay that message back for 40 people. Hey, back up. Just a thought. If you're a cave guide, if you've ever experienced something like that, let me know. Something else. I read a lot of books, and I love cave books. I don't think there's a book out there written by a show cave guide. That would be a cool book. I know there's some really cool books written by National Park Rangers. Actually, several of those. There's Bear in the Back Seat, the classic. I've mentioned it before. I love that book. Also, Andrea Langford, National Park guide who worked at several parks. She has written some fun books about her stories working in the national parks. I really love those books. But yeah, cave guides. Are there any books out there written? I'd love to read especially a Mammoth Cave tour guide book. That would be great. And of course, I've mentioned his name many times on just about every cave-related video I have. Jerry Bransford, I believe 5th generation cave guide working at Mammoth Cave. And going back to his great-great-great-grandfather, who was one of the original slave guides there. The guy is a living treasure. And I know he's contributed to some videos. And I want to say 1 or 2 books. But it'd be great if he wrote a book. So, yeah, anyway, so here we are, squeezing on through the cave. We've been in here for quite a while. Again, I only edited out maybe a minute of this video where I stopped. My wife and I stopped to do the selfie thing in front of the stage we saw earlier. So, yeah, there's going to be a little bit of blurriness. There's going to be some not-so-great camera work. Again, forgive me. But I wanted to keep this just a complete walkthrough of this cave on this tour day, just to give you that whole experience. And I like to do that, especially with the cave videos. And you can see it's getting tight through here. Having to duck a little bit, and even I'm not too tall myself, but this was just a very small area to get through. It was very curvy too, but also very exciting. So just definitely a cool feature of Great Saltpetre Cave.
That scared me. I don't know, but I want to get away from it.
That's a boy cave cricket.
What is that?
That's one of the one of the critters lives in the cave. That's a boy cave cricket.
Drip on my head.
It will lose my mind's
I forgot it was that high. I remember again.
If you're holding a lot of stuff, I had the same feel.
That's where we started at.
Oh,
We finally made it out.
yeah, we're innocent. We didn't do it.
Oh, you want to get out of here? We'll let you out. Thanks for coming over.
Yeah, they want to spend the night.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
They want to spend the night.
All right, let's go again. Yeah, and you just saw us walking towards the little tent there. People were staying there keeping dry, waiting for their cave tour. And like I said, they had some merchandise there, and that was cool. I just had a great experience. And we're leaving our car. By the way, they were very organized with their parking. They had people kind of guiding you through. Up here on the right, you'll see the I believe that's the fire department selling their beans and cornbread. I did not take advantage of that. I kind of regret it because that was very humble of them, and I should have gone down there and just sampled a little bit and put a little money in their donation box. I'll definitely have to do that next year. Then they had more junk food type concessions up here. The Friends of the Cave were set up talking about what they do. You can see the little stairs going up to the cave right there on the right. Oh yeah, and you saw the little cave cricket there at the end. That was great seeing him. I don't know if you've been in a situation, I can remember my granddad's property growing up, very secluded, very out in the woods. They had a cellar, and if that cellar door was open and you were in there as the sun went down, you could just hang out in that cellar and then watch it go pitch black. And then if you turn on a flashlight, yeah, there were little creepy crawly critters all over the place. Again, why isn't that sort of thing in more horror movies? Anyway, just a thought. And we're heading on out, getting back out on the main road. Again, just some nice little country road driving here, gravelly roads. More volunteers right there. If you look around, you can even see some of the tents as we pull out of here. There are tents here and there. You can see them through the trees. I think this is kind of a popular camping area for some people. And by the way, special thanks to those volunteers. There were a lot of them. They were doing a great job pointing people in the right direction and just keeping the flow of the place going. This was a lot of fun. I had way more fun here than I expected. This was on Saturday. Sunday was a sunny day, and I wondered how busy they would be on that day. I briefly toyed with coming back on Sunday just for the heck of it, just to kind of compare it, but we didn't. I'll definitely try to catch this again next year because it was so much fun, and just again a unique and rare opportunity to see a cave that's just not open all the time, and a great area too. This is an area that I haven't explored as much as I would like, so I want to get back down into the Mt Vernon, Renfro Valley area and do more. So if you've been to this cave, let me know. Let me know what you think. Thanks.